Good morning, everybody, I guess, or good afternoon, or whatever it is when you're listening to this. Greetings, everyone. Brian here. We're going to do another supplemental episode. This time we're going to do what hopefully is a good idea. Well, I guess we'll find out. Essentially, when I first had this idea, I thought, like, hey, it would be interesting to set this story in kind of this time period of the Star Trek universe, because I would find it interesting and cool. And it didn't really occur to me until later that it might be as confusing as hell for everybody else. Uh, so um, I know Star Trek lore and timeline like the back of my hand, so it literally does not occur to me what might be confusing or unclear for other people. So what we thought might be helpful is if we had one of our listeners who is not much of a Star Trek fan, but is definitely a listener of the show. Emily, say hello, Emily.
Hi.
Come on, and we can talk about anything that is confusing or unclear that we might be able to clear up in terms of where our story fits into the larger tapestry of the Star Trek franchise. So that's it. Also with us is our captain, Ryan, Captain Maddox.
Hello.
And our doctor, Dr. Teal, Tara.
Hello, hello.
Along with Ensign Logan there in the background, as always. So yeah, that's essentially it. I was supposed to come up with some kind of itinerary, I guess, and I didn't really do that. So Emily, is there anything like right off the bat that you're like, when they talk about this, I have no idea what the hell they're talking about?
There are certain aspects, like in terms of I don't Dr. Teal's race, for instance, like the empath and everything, like I'm like, oh, that's something that's a thing. Okay, cool. All right, let's see how this plays out. This is really interesting to me because, like, from a Dungeons and Dragons standpoint, like, can't really do that. So like you
That's
have
right. We should also say that you're a big Dungeons and Dragons person, role-playing game, and a big Critical Role fan as well. So that's kind of the world you're coming from.
Yes. I tried to set up to where it's all behind me, but it didn't work. I have more dice than I know how to use. But from a dungeon, like, you can't really do that. Like, you can roll insight to try to figure out like what's going on, but like,
yeah,
for the most part, it's like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that that's something that could be done. So like, well, and
if I was going to say, if it's any consolation, most of the time I have to roll to use that ability, and I fail my roll anyways.
Yeah,
well,
that specific aspect is definitely a thing. Like, I've played a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, not that much. But that specific aspect is definitely a thing of like, well, that's in the TV show, so we have to sort of figure out how to incorporate it. But it kind of breaks the game, so we sort of have to figure out how to have it, but also not have it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the tightrope that I, at least as a GM, find myself walking all the time with Tara. Of like, I want to roll to figure out if he's thinking about the answer to the mystery. And I'm like, well, okay. Let's do it this way, sort of.
What's interesting is the most famous and the most familiar betazoid that Star Trek fans know is Deanna Troi, and I wonder if they had the exact same conversation when they were coming up with Next Generation, to not make her a full-on telepath, but just make her empathic, so she can't read minds. She can only sense feelings.
Would be boring.
It would give the game away, eh?
I think that's absolutely why they made her half beta Z, so she can do the emotions but not the thoughts.
Which is why when we started playing this, and we've determined that Teal was going to be a full telepathic betazoid, I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. She's gonna have the answers to everything. And then Brian's like, oh, this person has had training in deflecting mental attacks and yada yada.
Yeah, the last episode, looks like all of the people that you were interviewing were like, you can't do that, and Tara was like, yes,
I can though.
Yeah, I mean, because it would just be a very short episode if Tara was like, I read his mind and see if he did it.
Yeah.
He
And then he did
guilty.
it.
Yeah, the murder mystery
I
episode.
will say this
Yeah.
is that even without like the full like telepathic abilities, Dr. Teal was like, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
this is
I
what's
think
going
you.
on.
I think you.
It's very fitting that Tara is actually playing the one Betazoid on the show. So
Yeah,
thank you.
It is a very good synergy in terms of like character strength and personal strength or individual player strength.
Yay.
Yeah.
It was almost a happy accident. I was just like, this would be a fun race to play.
Ryan, what
fun-
should I do? This one, I guess.
I don't know. This thing?
And then I had a question in relation to the other three players. Captain Maddox is human, correct?
Captain
Or no?
Maddox, if you listen to the episode 0 that sets up all the characters, you'll learn that he presents as human, he looks human, and he thought for the first half of his life, through his adolescence actually, that he was human. But it turns out he's actually half Andorian, which is the blue-skinned aliens with the antennae coming out of their heads that you'll see with the shocking white hair.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So the history behind his genealogy is that his father had an affair with an Andorian and then
Bossy.
raised Maddox Rajay as his own son, and that also his adoptive mother just treated him like he was her child. So he never knew anything about this affair until after he hit his adolescence. At that point, it like blew his mind. So the short answer to your question is he's half Andorian, half human, but he looks almost entirely human. He's
So
a little bit more light skinned than normal.
so my brain, whenever someone said Andorian, because I listened to the first the supplement explaining all of the characters thing. I definitely thought he Andorian equaled human
Oh.
for a second.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
I don't know races.
Sure.
So I was like, oh, okay, because I just assumed that it was like it had another name.
Like a
Or-
Canadian. Like he's
Yeah.
human, but he's
Right.
Canadian.
He's from, yeah.
Yeah.
He's from
Well,
the
no, 'cause,
Andor
like-
province in wherever.
From
Well,
Canada.
because and Star Trek fans don't shoot me, but in Star Wars they don't call there are humans from different planets, but they call them the planet that they're
Corellians,
from.
or correct.
Oh
Right.
yeah,
I
Corellians
assumed
and
it was
yeah.
something along that vein, and so
Interesting.
my brain was like, oh, okay, I just assumed that, so that's
Okay.
That's see,
I
this is kind of this is a perfect reason why it's good that we're having you on the show, because you are interested, and I imagine a lot of our listeners are going to be interested in just an actual play podcast, just listening to a new role playing game being fleshed out, and the fact that not all of our listeners are going to be diehard Star Trek fans, that there's going to be a group of them that out there that aren't, and this is perfect. This is a great way to address some of these possible confusions.
Also, when we first started playing, when Brian asked me to be part of the game and everything, I was like, I don't know as much Star Trek as you guys. I'm going to drown. I can't. And no, you don't want me to play. And he said, no, because it's going to be important that somebody is part of our crew that will slow us down and say hey, we need to explain this better. Or even if it's just explaining to me, it's also explaining to people who are not huge Star Trek fans. Whereas, everybody else may be able to speak fluent, computer jargon. I'm going to be like, hi, what on earth does that mean?
What the fuck are you talking about?
Hi. Yeah. So this is important on that level too. And,
Yeah, I know we talked about it in our episode 0 interview. I don't remember if it ended up in the final cut, so to speak, or not. But we talked about that, and I specifically said there is stuff that feels like oxygen to me in terms of what is common knowledge for a Star Trek fan. The same as stuff it would never occur to you as a huge Harry Potter fan that I might not know that thing because it's just such basic.
Yeah.
So that flip dynamic of that.
Both of us, Emily and I both. Would
Yeah, I'm sitting
excuse
yep.
me.
Right,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
How do you not know that Professor Sprout teaches herbology? Get over yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. or that Snape is a Hufflepuff. Like, come on, guys, everybody knows
Harry
that.
Potter stuff behind me on the
Everybody
wall.
knows that. Ruffle yarn.
Ruffle yarn.
Uh,
The lost
Um,
Harry Potter house, ruffle yarn.
yeah, we've never told that story, I don't think, right?
No.
Like Tara and I were walking out of a
Joanne's.
thrift store or something or whatnot,
Yeah.
and there was a sign for like ruffle yarn, which I guess is a type of yarn, a sale on ruffle
Yeah.
yarn or something.
Brian goes, "Isn't that the lost Harry Potter house?" And I like fell down laughing. So then he was doing the sorting hat on, and you're it. Oh, sorry, it's ruffle yarn.
So now that's our fake go-to Harry Potter house.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But yeah, so essentially like having that presence within the actual game and in the moment. And there's a perfect example of it in our first mission where Tara, I think, asked something about, do Romulans have cloaking devices at this point? And like in my brain, it never even occurred to me that like, yes, this is 2349, which is several,
Adoy.
80 or 80 some years after the events of Balance of Terror, obviously. So it's like, anyway.
Well, that's another thing that's interesting, because like I know Klingons and Romulans, and like from the small amount of Star Trek that I have watched in my life, I already knew that like Romulans had green blood and all of this other things, and like and so like when in I think one of the episodes they're like, well, we don't know that yet, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, oh, I just assumed that everybody knew that, but it like where it lands,
yeah,
they haven't learned all that much yet. So
And here's a question, Brian. In our timeline, do Klingons have ridged foreheads?
Yeah. Yes,
I guess
they
so,
do.
because it's after the movies. Yeah.
And Worf is born. Worf in our time. Worf, I think, is like 4 years old or something at the moment. But yes, our campaign takes place between Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and the beginning of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So they definitely have the ridges. Ever since the Deep Space Nine episode and then the Enterprise story arc, now both are canon, which still doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I know Enterprise came up with a whole answer for it, but
which I actually liked. I thought it was, as if you're going to explain it, I thought that was as good a way of explaining it as they could have done it.
Yeah,
but
it's absolutely the best job that was possible to do, for sure.
Do you ladies want to know what they did?
You guys don't already know? Oh my god, why are girls even allowed in science fiction?
What? Okay, I didn't know that it had. I always assumed they had the ridge, so that's interesting.
Well,
from a lore standpoint,
they did from the moment that Star Trek went onto the big screen. The second in the opening scene of the very first Star Trek movie, the Klingons had their now famous rigid foreheads. But back in the 60s, when they did the original series, they just pretty inappropriately dressed up white dudes in brown makeup and put dark hair and gold lame and dark eyebrows on them.
Come on, guys.
It's sort of like
I mean, it did not age well.
It's a very straightforward, like, these guys are space Mongolians kind of situation.
Ooh, that's cringeworthy.
It is.
Really cringy. I did not realize that.
So, but after the eugenics wars in the 1990s, where the humans were bred to be, there was a super race of humans that were bred. That's where Khan Noonien Singh comes from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. He was, they're called, what's the short term for them, Brian? Augmented humans. And this super race of humans was faster, smarter, and more intense than even Klingons. And so the short synopsis of what they explained in Enterprise was, when Klingons found out about these augments, they adapted their DNA and plugged it into themselves to try to make them as
super Klingon augments.
And so and when that happened, that they devolved, the ridges devolved into human skeleton, and then eventually they bred out of that.
And all of that originates because of one joke in one episode of Deep Space Nine, which is one of the greatest episodes that there is, and it's a great like leaning on the fourth wall kind of parody of Star Trek's and love letters to Star Trek. But it's the episode where they go back in time to the events of the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles.
Trouble with Tribbles.
Which has
Trials
Klingons
and Tribulations.
And and they're on the space station, and they have to find the Klingon saboteur
who looks like a human.
Who is disguised as a human. And so that all like the whole Enterprise arc comes off of one moment that is one joke where the Deep Space Nine characters are looking at original series Klingons, and Worf is there as one of the Deep Space Nine characters, and they look at Worf and they go, "What?
WTF, man?"
What the fuck, man? And all he says is, "We don't talk about it with outsiders." And like it's just a throwaway, lean on the fourth wall kind of joke.
Yeah. I forgot about that.
But before that, it had always been, well, it was just the 60s, and it's if the 60s had the budget that the 90s had, then they would have had the ridges. But once you put characters from the 90s show into the setting of the 60s show, and you have them acknowledge the difference, then you have to reconcile why that difference exists.
Yeah,
we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, we digress. That's a very long. Sorry
sure.
Oh no, I mean, like, I find that interesting. I'm a big sucker for like lore and how things match up, regardless of what the fandom is.
Yeah.
So like using Harry Potter as a reference, like where everything lands in relation to the sequel play.
Yeah.
And wanting to throw things at who should not be named.
Yes, agreed.
After reading that, so like
it's too bad she disappeared.
Yeah. But I find stuff like that interesting. I don't know. There are some things in relation to D&D that, like, lore wise, I have no knowledge of. I know how to play the game frontwards and backwards and upside down. But and I know some of like the rules that are permanently stuck in my head.
As somebody who's never played D&D before, is there, I know you have campaigns, which you create your own sort of stories for, but is there an overarching history that is considered canon, for lack of a better word?
It depends on what book you end up playing out of.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
like, there are different like campaign books. So like Matt Mercer with Critical Role, he created his own, which is the Player's Guide to Wildmount, which is their current campaign. And you can play inside that world with the lore and everything that goes in it. But there's also like Tasha's or Call of Cthulhu and like all of that. And it's its own like linear storyline that you can play within. Now you can homebrew it to where like it kind of like what Brian does with the like the last couple campaigns that you did, where it has like the same basic rule structure and you have like a similar storyline, but like everything that is created is made by the DM. So like
cool.
It's in like that way.
I didn't know where all the campaigns and stories came from, whether there was just like books that everybody follows or if the DMs are able to make up their own stuff.
They're far away from me at this point, behind me on the couch, and I'm not about to do a backflip to go reach them. But like there's a so like in Stranger Things, for instance, they play out of like one of the original like D&D books. And so like when Stranger Things came out, they re-released the original D&D books with like the addition of what they referred to as the demigorgons, and like adapting that as
that's cool.
The current.
So they sort of went back and retroactively renamed them demigorgons to line up with the show.
That's
neat.
cool.
Yeah, so Stranger Things took D&D and put their own original creation on top of it, and then D&D went back and made that original creation part of what they had built on top of it in the
That's really
place.
cool.
You can't see it, but it's it's there. It's the D&D.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, the Stranger
like
Things.
the Demigorgon mini and everything.
That's
so.
cool.
For those just listening and not watching, there is Emily has a pile of all of her games behind her, and so she's lifting up her laptop.
I don't have a D&D corner with all of my dice or anything.
Those are all things of dice. That's amazing.
Yeah, she has jars of dice, like some of us would have jars of pastries.
Pastries.
What's the word that our friend Anthony used in college?
Preserves.
Oh, preserves. Yeah,
Yes.
so he was the 90-year-old college kid. Yes, I have to go get preserves.
What was I just gonna ask? Oh, no, went right out of my noggin.
Oh, that happens to me constantly.
Let me throw this. Let me throw this at you, Emily. In terms of the timeline, is that confusing at all? Because that was the part that I didn't really think about at the beginning, and then as I thought about it more, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be so confusing to people.
I know enough. For me, I know enough about Star Trek to where you're like, okay, it lands between Kirk and Picard. I'm like, okay, it's in between that timeline, but I don't know enough about what happens between that to
Right.
be like, oh,
But-
I'm confused.
But is labeling it as, well, this is between Kirk and Picard, is that enough to at least give you this as a listener, just as a any other listener, enough of a starting point? Because honestly, and Ryan and I went back and forth a lot over this when we were coming up with the the whole intro of okay, our version of space of the Final Frontier dialogue bits. We went back and forth quite a bit, okay, how do we put a specific reference into when this is happening, and how do we phrase it in such a way that is both pithy and clear enough to somebody who doesn't know Star Trek all that well. So do you find that the between Kirk and Picard is enough to give you that grounding that you need?
Yeah, because I feel like from a name standpoint, most people, even if they have a very surface level knowledge of Star Trek, know who those two characters are.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
To me, that from my standpoint, I'm like, okay, I've seen enough Star Trek to know that there's that gap there, but I
It's
also know that there is some overlap.
Show.
So yeah,
it's after the old show, but before the new old show.
Yeah.
Between the 60s and the 90s.
Yeah.
So, that's all you need.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I find it that I was like, okay, this is where it lands. I have no idea what's going on, but okay, cool, let's go.
Okay. Yeah, that was basically my main concern, because the reason I liked that era and that concept at all in the first place is because it's in the fandom, it's what's known as the Lost Era. Basically, between, at least in the original universe, the original canon franchise, everything that happens after the events of Star Trek Undiscovered Country and everything that happens before the beginning of TNG is essentially this huge blank spot. We have 6 movies and a television show covering Kirk's era, and then we now have three full television series and 4 movies that cover Picard's era. So there's all of this material at these 2 bookends, and there's this huge blank spot in between. And so that's why I wanted to set our story there, because there was so much kind of room to play with.
Yeah.
And also that it's not during one of their popular eras, so we're not the Tempest is gonna save the day. Oh nope, Kirk's here, never mind.
Exactly.
It's sort of like the the B squads.
We're the B team.
We're the B team because all the A team is in either before or after us.
Yeah. It definitely, we can definitely avoid the scenario of, oh well, the whale probe is coming and we need to do something about that, or oh man, did you hear what the Deep Space Nine crew just had to deal with the Dominion? Yeah, that sounded really sounded really compelling as a story to follow along with.
I mean, I feel like the Tempest is their own A crew, honestly, because of the fact of where they land in between things. So I think
we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I think you guys do a good job.
We're full of
Now-
animals, but
Yeah.
we make
What?
it happen.
That's something else like that is a key part of world building in general for any storytelling, whatever. And that's something that Star Trek has not necessarily been the best example of in terms of it's I forget who, but there's a screenwriter who basically has the phrase the off-screen life, right? So the sense that whatever your character is doing when they are in front of the camera, when they step out of the frame of the camera, they still have a full rounded, life because in their sense, they are a complete character or a complete person that lives within a self-consistent world, right?
Right.
And whether you can kind of get that impression from the way they act on screen that there is this off-screen stuff going on.
Yeah.
And Star Trek has not always been great in about like, well, there are also other starships out there presumably doing something interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
The Federation is not just one ship.
Right.
Yeah.
They're always like, oh, here's this ship. It did badly and now is in trouble. Like, it's
Yeah.
just...
I mean,
And
we
it,
sort of go ahead, Brian.
Well, there's definitely like moments. I think one of the reasons why Star Trek has lasted as greater influence than a lot of other because there were a lot of like cheapo space television shows in the 60s.
Sure.
And none of them have had the staying power that Star Trek has. And I think part of that reason is because even in the original series, they had elements of that of like, oh yeah, here's the constellation and it was in trouble and we had to go help it. And
you saw glimpses of a bigger universe.
Yeah.
Right.
But you have those moments, but also you have these aspects of like, yep, a starship needed to save the galaxy and it was named the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stay tuned next week when a starship needs to save another galaxy.
Yeah.
It'll be named
Will it be the Enterprise? Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So one of the things I definitely wanted to do was have the sense of like, there's another starship out there where interesting things are happening.
Yeah.
And that is a compelling TV show or compelling storyline.
Yeah.
That does not necessarily involve it being the single most important ship in all of human history or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's only one ship in range.
Yeah.
Always.
That's interesting because in something I never even really thought of, but if you look at all the other Star Trek shows, DS9 for at least half of the series, it was just a station, so it was a completely different dynamic where the universe came to the station as opposed to the travelers going and exploring the universe.
Right.
But then in every other incarnation of Star Trek where there is a ship, a primary ship, that's it, because the Enterprise in Enterprise was the one of two ships. And Voyager, they got lost in the Gamma quadrant or Delta quadrant. Gamma.
Delta.
Wait, which Delta? I'm sorry, I got DS9 on my brain. They got lost in the Delta quadrant, so they're literally the only ship. And now we're into Discovery, and now Discovery is the only ship from the timeline that we know in their current predicament.
Right.
So yeah, the Next Generation and original series are the only ones where there were concurrently an entire fleet of starships out there theoretically doing their own business.
Yeah.
But now also Lower Decks. Lower Decks is the only like contemporary Star Trek show where that has that same kind of feeling that the original series The Next Generation had, in the sense of like, okay, this is our ship, but we're gonna have an adventure with the Alhambra this week, or the Sacramento.
The best part of the opening for me is when it arrives and then sees what's going on and then turns around and leaves. That's like every Star Trek episode that I've watched. I'm like, no, just leave. Just don't fix it. Just
don't
leave.
help it. Just leave it.
Last week when we covered Lower Decks, that was literally the thing I said about the opening. So
oh really?
We should date.
Oh, we should. We should be married for 10 years and stuff.
And have 3 children.
And have 3 children.
But we do. We both still laugh at that every time.
It's funny every time.
And it sort of manifested in Tempest a little bit, where at least in the first couple of missions, and Tara in particular is like, we can just go.
We can leave.
Just leave.
Yeah, we can just leave it here.
And
everyone's like, Dr. Teal, why are you on the bridge?
And me as a GM in that moment of like, shit, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, don't leave.
I didn't think about just like not engaging with the premise of the episode.
Brian will be like, and then the Tempest goes to get ice cream. I don't know.
Yeah. And
Oh,
there's one, I forget which early mission it is, but there's like where you guys literally do leave, and I'm like, you guys just kind of have to go back. I think it's the first one. No, it's session 0. So it's not one of the missions we released, but in session 0 with the time anomaly, it's the world with the bluer sun. It's one of the scenarios from one of the published books. But yeah, you guys literally just leave, and I'm like, I don't.
What do I do?
I don't know what to do now.
To quote TJ from one of the early episodes, I don't accept your premise.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Emily?
I was just gonna say from a I mean, like, I feel like from a role-playing tabletop game standpoint, that's part of the fun, because we break our DM for my Dungeons and Dragons game all the time. For instance, he had us fight, it was like one of our first big fights of our campaign, and he had us fight an undead green dragon, which is a feat in and of itself. At least it's supposed to be. Unless your DM unknowingly gives you a ball that you can literally trap your enemies in and thrust them off and break it before it falls and then kill all of them in one fell swoop. To where our DM just kind of is like, well, I don't know what to do now. You weren't supposed to beat it that easily. Okay.
I've heard that our nephews Cole and Dylan, when they play D&D, they frequently, or I guess it's Dylan's move that is like, okay, so I come up against this thing and I kick him in the face, and that's like his move every time. And whoever's playing DM is like, can we do something else though? Can we try a different thing? It's like,
I forget that they play, and that makes my heart happy.
Yeah.
I know.
As a cousin, I'm like, you guys are so cute and innocent and
I
just
love it.
punching things, and I love it.
Next time we're all together, we got to play an RPG game,
Which would be my wedding, right?
Ooh,
Just manifest that into the universe.
Yeah. Set up an RPG, not an RPG game. It's like an ATM machine. That's
RPG.
Or a PIN number.
Yeah.
You need to use your PIN number to get money out of the ATM machine so you can play the role-playing game.
It should have been. You should have said RPG game, Brian. I'm sorry, I'm gonna call you out on that.
He did say RPG game.
You know, he said role playing game.
Did he?
I heard RPG.
Oh, I missed it. I thought he said RPG.
I'm gonna mute my mic for a second.
Logan is yelling at Daddy from the hallway. Dad, he did say RPG game, Dad.
Dad, you're wrong, Dad.
Yeah, that's definitely, this is a little bit off the lore aspects, but that's definitely something I knew intellectually going into this, of like, oh yes, you will come up with plans as a DM, and your players will totally, surprise you and do a left turn. Like, I knew that intellectually coming in, and I did not know that emotionally.
Mistakes have been made.
I can't wait to cut together the sigh reel, the Brian sigh reel. Just like how often we have thrown a total monkey wrench into what has been a perfectly and like painstakingly planned out scenario where we're like, nope, we're gonna have.
I just have these brilliant Star Trek episodes carefully devised, and then you guys get to them.
Well, I also find that interesting from a lore standpoint too, because like you've put all of this lore into it, and then they're like, but what if we just do this? And you're like, well, I mean, I guess.
That's not a Star Trek way of dealing with it, but I guess it works.
Like Goodspeed, for instance, is like, well, can I just like shoot it? I don't understand.
Or where he's like, I'm just gonna punch him.
Oh, and then he actually did. And you're like, now be careful. This is combat. So is one of your actions punching this dude in the face?
Absolutely.
Yes.
TJ's like, yes, that is my action.
I'm punching him in the face.
Okay.
God, we
And then
had
it crippled us for the rest of that combat session.
and then we had, a 20-minute thing about pot roast and
I forgot about the pot roast thing. Pot roast is canon now. Congratulations.
pot roast is canon. Yeah. I'm gonna roll fitness for fitness pot roast into this Tupperware. And everybody yelled at me for that.
Well, I loved
Logan
that.
has changed screens.
We only yelled at
Yes,
you
Logan.
because we're sad we didn't come up with it ourselves.
That's probably true. Yeah, Logan went from my room to Ryan's room, so
But yeah, I always find that's my brain just went bleh.
it's okay.
From a lore standpoint, like I also learn a lot that I didn't know, like the Romulan blood thing, like that knowledge isn't like
That's a good
Everyone,
known yet. And I also didn't know about the Klingon war thing either.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
I also learn about lore from things that have actually happened. So
Yeah.
That's interesting because that is one that isn't really clearly spelled out, I don't think, for a lot of even veteran Star Trek listeners. You want to talk about
what specifically are you referring to?
the Klingon War?
But which one? Like the
They fight all the time.
I just learned that there was more than one. I had no idea.
the one from like the Discovery era, like that's one, or the alternate one from yesterday's Enterprise? Like, I guess is my question. Does that make sense?
Are you asking me or are you asking Emily?
I honestly don't know. I don't know what's going on.
So Emily,
nothing.
are you under the impression that during our campaign right now that we are at war with the Klingons? Is that what you were getting at, Emily?
No, I was.
okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't know who that question was directed at. No, I just didn't know that there had been a war and like
Gotcha.
there had
Okay.
been like peace for like
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
50 whatever years.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I had no idea that's a thing. Okay, cool. There
Yeah.
was a
Well,
fight.
that's-
Though I did enjoy the interactions between the Klingons because everyone was like, we're just gonna defect the Klingons, and you can just hear Brian slowly dying.
Oh, because Bach was so great. We love
Yeah.
Bach.
That's a great example of like me succeeding too well at a thing that I tried to do, right? Because as the first original episode, I wanted to be like, okay, here's this guy who's your quote unquote ally, but he's the asshole. And here's the guy who's your quote unquote enemy, but he's the cool one. Like I wanted to reverse that dynamic. And then you guys were like, can we just hang out with him forever?
Yeah, we just like
Yeah.
Bach. Yeah.
Well, we're not used to you being cool, so it was just kind of fun.
Yikes.
That's-
we
so
didn't know
so
you
that
had
whole-
it in you.
So, and that whole aspect is actually probably the thing that I've worried about most in terms of being clear or confusing to somebody who doesn't. So because we're in this like in between era, in between Kirk and Picard, the way things happen in real life, the way things happen from a production standpoint is basically they started making the Next Generation, and Gene Roddenberry decided, okay, this is set in the future, so the Federation and the Klingons are friends now in the first couple of seasons.
Right.
But in the first couple of seasons of TNG, they don't really explain how that came to be. It's just that's the way it is now, and they left kind of the origin story of that down the road. Then the problem became that it's not like nowadays where you have Marvel TV shows and Marvel movies and they sort of talk to each other at least a little bit. The movie side of Star Trek and the television show side of Star Trek both decided to come up with an answer for that same question at about the same time, and the answers are completely different.
Oh no.
So one answer is the events of Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. Like, okay, that's how we made peace with the Klingons.
Right.
But then at about the same time, TNG, the show, came up with yesterday's Enterprise, which is, the Enterprise before Picard's falls through a time warp, and that changes history, and that old version of the Enterprise is what made the difference between peace and war.
Right.
The problem is those those two answers are set 50 years apart. So there's this giant in universe, there's this half a century period where we made peace with the Klingons, and then we did it again 50 years later.
So obviously there was a degradation of relations over the course of those 50 years.
Yeah, and so like that's just a discontinuity in terms of how the universe was produced in the first place, right? Like two different pieces came up with two different answers. But like part of what I found interesting about setting the campaign here was if you put it in between those two events, then you sort of get this like Game of Thronesy kind of political situation where it's like, war but not really war. There's like shades of gray going on, and that kind of thing. But again, that was something like when I first thought of it, like, oh man, that'd be cool. And then only later did I think that's probably going to be confusing as hell for a lot of people. So like that's what I was worried. Like that was the initial impetus of doing this episode, or doing it in this way of like, is this clear? Like, because I'm worried that this is not completely not clear to people.
For everybody. Yeah.
I mean, like for me, who knows very like surface level amount, I'm like, well, this is really interesting. I had no idea, and so like I learned something new about Star Trek lore that I didn't before, and like I don't know, I found it interesting for me. I've been super worried about how confusing it might be to basically anybody who is not me or Ryan.
Well, and I think you actually, if there are other listeners out there, and you're one of them, listener, then I think you probably just explained it to them. What you just set up a good explanation for why we are where we are, and what the political ramifications and situation is in the galaxy at that point.
I agree, and especially you started the episode of your first homebrew episode where it was like, there is not a correct answer for this, and if you answer a certain way, it could completely change how the canon goes. So be careful.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, let's see what happens. I don't know what canon is, so like, let's go.
That's and that's definitely why I made sure to do that in that first homebrew mission, because it was like, okay, this is going to be the start of a branching off point, and I don't want people to be confused when next season this thing happens, but it definitely didn't happen this way in the show that I've already watched. And so why are those two things different? So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in the sense that like that's what I think is really interesting from a storytelling point of view, like the potential of that. But then I'm also super worried about how confusing that will be to people who like, oh yeah, I watched TNG with my parents 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Right.
And like,
although if they did, they probably won't remember the minutia as well as someone who watches it, every year or something. Like, watches it all the way through.
And I mean, like that's from what you were saying, from a storytelling standpoint with a tabletop game like this, you kind of have, and choosing the time frame that you did, you kind of have that ability to kind of like, just in case you do accidentally alter something, you could go back and fix it if you wanted to. Like you could create something that would be like, oh well, to keep canon, we could go back to and try to fix whatever it is that was weird. But to my knowledge, nothing happened. So
that's definitely like, and we will probably talk about this when we do our Discovery episode. But like that's, Ryan and I have discussed this in the sense that like we think one of the
spoilers in case I don't think Emily's seen Discovery yet. So
well, I'm not going to get too I'm not going to get too specific, but like at least I personally think that Discovery, at least the first couple of seasons, are a little bit handicapped because of when they decided to set the show. Like it's in this area where they didn't really have that much room to maneuver to tell their own story, and when they did, it doesn't really fit with everything else. So I think that's a handicap on the first couple of seasons of Discovery. And so that's why I definitely wanted to establish no, our players can do something else, and therefore we are not, I don't have to eventually figure out how to stitch that into every bit of screen time that comes after it, right? Like, because things happen in Discovery now and you go, well, that sort of doesn't fit with the stuff that comes after it. And so I definitely wanted to give me personally the out of like, yeah, if we do that, then it's okay because
We're branching
the
off.
setup.
Well,
Yeah.
also because we're not the flagship and the star pupil of the Pet Federation. Like, we are going on our side missions that don't have huge consequences for the rest of the
Not yet.
galaxy. Not yet. I hope that I can work in pot roast somewhere.
I have confidence, dear.
I
Oh,
also
poor
have
Brian.
confidence because like the pot roast thing cracked me up, especially making sure we put like the name Tempest on the bottom of the Tupperware.
And then the conversation of, is that even a gift, or is it just now their
Yeah.
problem?
I like my favorite part of that bit was the like, well, now you're just giving them something else to worry about because they've got to bring it back. Like, I love that part.
We broke Tara.
I forgot about that. Oh god.
Okay, well, I feel a lot better, guys, personally.
Good.
Is there anything else kind of in this ballpark that we wanted to maybe touch on and discuss before we wrapped it up?
So I just recently got caught up on some of the supplemental stuff, i.e. the most recent, like how we play the game kind of thing. And I was telling Ryan this, I didn't realize that when you guys roll, granted you're rolling virtual dice, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
That it's opposite in D&D. So like you said, like a natural 1 is like really good and a natural 20 is really bad. And I was like, oh, what?
That's the opposite.
I was like,
Emily's nerd brain just broke.
I was like, what? And like Jordan my fiance plays a Star Wars tabletop game, and they have their own dice. Like they don't even use
standard
a standard like bag of like dice.
D20.
So
and
and stuff like that. So I've been learning a lot from a tabletop gaming, like role-playing game
Sure.
standpoint.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because like I'm learning just like the different aspects and elements to all of that, and the gameplay is completely different because you have the threats and the
Momentum
and everything like that, and you don't have stuff like that. It's like you roll a d20 and hope for the best.
Oh yeah.
So that's interesting, Emily. It brings up so something that we've tried to do and have a lot of times failed to make sure that we specify what the result of our rolls are in the show, because a lot of times we'll roll and then we're just like, oh yay, or oh boo, instead of like saying, oh yes, we got 2 successes and 1 failure. Have you ever been listening and been kind of lost in terms of the game mechanic where we fell out or where roles might have played out?
I
guess I'm asking, how should we be doing a better job than what we are doing overall?
Overall, most of the time the sound effects help, even if you don't say something, like if it goes murmur or whatever, like they roll high or whatever.
That was pretty good. That was pretty close.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm really good at sound effects. I don't know why. I'm like, someone failed something, but I don't always know, because sometimes there's a similar noise that is a critical success. And so like there was one of the last episodes I listened to, there was someone I think it was Holden, had a critical success on something, and I heard the womp womp noise, and I was like, and then they were like, oh, critical success. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, some of them are kind of weird the way they play out, because you can definitely succeed but also get a complication. So it's kind of hard to delineate. Yes, you succeeded at the test, but there was also a complication. So me as a sound designer, it's like, well, do I put this
noise?
Yeah, so I just throw both in sometimes.
So there's like a critical failure within a roll of 5 dice, but there were enough successes in there, so that's still a success, but also the critical failure means we get a threat or something.
That's that natural 20 that we're talking about.
I didn't realize that that's what that meant. I thought a critical success means that they like over succeeded and there was no complication there. And so that is a an eye-opening thing for me. I'm like, okay, I understand that a little bit better now.
Okay.
From a gameplay standpoint, because
Yeah.
like I'm used to certain things. Now I have learned, like, based on what you guys are rolling, like what works best, who does what better, and I feel like that is similar in regardless of what kind of tabletop role-playing game you're playing.
Sure.
Because you have things that you are much better at, like my character in our D&D game, I can track something like there's no tomorrow, but have me talk to somebody and I'm like, what? I'm sorry. Huh? So, you know, from that standpoint, like I enjoy that and I get that. So
yeah,
I feel like that's
I mean that's
similar.
an aspect of like that part of it is definitely the newest part for us, like it as a game, and especially because Star Trek Adventures is built as a game so differently from what most people know, which is D&D or something pretty close to it. That it's that's kind of a challenge in terms from an audio production standpoint of like, okay, how do we make the playing of the game come across clearly but succinctly and not distract from the story and the character and the comedy or whatever, you know, the actual moments of it.
Right.
Which I feel like we've gotten a little bit better at, but we're still definitely learning.
I honestly like, I feel like the successes and failures and everything like that add to the momentum of the storyline, because like, maybe it's just me, because but I don't know, but like in most things in life you succeed or fail and learn from that and go on. And so like I think it helps to like have the sound effects and it doesn't, I don't think it, to me, I don't think it takes away from the story, because it helps develop, well, what are we going to do next kind of thing, regardless. Hi, Logan. In relation to whether or not they fail or succeed. So I find that part of it helpful and interesting. And okay, where's that? What are they going to do next? What's the story going to be now? Oh, Teal can't figure out what they're thinking. Okay, let's see if they figure out where the spy is on the ship. Are they gonna do it, or is he gonna escape?
Good. Also, we're such a yes and kind of group as far as improv and stuff goes. So we'll fail, and then you know Ryan will say, and then I trip and smash my face in the wall, and like I think those parts are like, it's a fun little, you know, like improv exercise for all of us, but also like continues with the storytelling of just like making it so that you're not just standing there, you know, then your character, like in a video game, stands there. Oh, failed the task. Stands there anyway.
It reminds me of one of the times where you tried to mentally probe somebody and you failed, and somebody said the line like, oh, Teal is just staring really hard at the person, trying to see into the.
I think it was you were trying to interview the
Vulcan.
Oh my god, Vulcan. Thank you. My brain was like, oh my god, what is Spock's race?
And I'm just staring hard. Nothing's happening.
Beads of sweat.
Pop a blood vessel in my eye. Like, oh man. But I think that aspect is important to keep it to keep it feeling real, and you know, it's part of the storytelling is just like, and then you know, okay, so this thing happens, which as far as I understand in D&D is like 90% of it is just like rolling with the rolling. I see what I did there. Rolling with it and seeing like, okay, so where's my character gonna go and what's that gonna mean? And if I fail, okay, then I'll do this thing instead, or you know, whatever. And that, to be quite honest, was a huge part of what made me nervous about RPGs. Is just like, oh, I don't want to make stuff up on the spot and like, wow, affect everyone. No. And it, you know, once you get used to the idea of it and the mechanics of it, like it's super fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what brings like tabletop gaming and everything like that together. It's like the sense of community, but like also, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen, I'm gonna do it anyway.
You know, Ryan, it would be funny now if we actually learned how to play D&D, because after only knowing how to play Star Trek Adventures as our RPG, we'd be like, yes, I rolled a 1, and Emily would be like, no, you died.
Absolutely horrified.
No.
What?
What? No.
Can I join your campaign? I roll 1s a lot.
Yes.
Ones are my friend.
That goes again. I don't remember which mission, if it's one of the ones that we actually released or not, but like we used to play Risk all the time in college, all the time.
Yes.
And Ryan was notorious for constantly rolling incredibly well.
6.
And yeah, 6s all the time. And so when we started playing this, it was like, okay, we're going to find out if Ryan, all those years playing Risk, was rolling well or just rolling high.
Yeah.
Because the mechanic is flipped. So we're going to know now
Right.
the exact nature of Ryan's probability manipulation.
He still does pretty well.
I mean, he still does pretty well, yeah.
Oh, banana.
Well,
Sorry, I'm being
Banana.
Johnny wanted a banana, so now Logan needs a banana. Everyone wants a banana. Sorry.
Well, that's
That's fine.
Mute.
That's also actually an interesting point, because something else I've tried to do consciously with all of the homebrew missions is make sure that there were story choices in the thing that didn't have to do with rolling at all, right? Like, so that no matter what the mission was, there was a choice the players would have to make as a character that would determine the story. So it's not just like, we go down this hallway, and if we succeed, we get into the room, and if we don't, we fail. It's like there's 2 rooms, and Ryan as a character has to pick which, room, right or left.
Where do you want to go? Right.
Yeah.
So honestly,
choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
And honestly, that comes from kind of an insecurity, I think, of like, well, if we just leave the uncertainty up to the rolls itself, then that won't be enough, I guess.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's part of balancing any tabletop game. Like, do you make them roll to do anything, or do you find the balance between the two to where, like, okay, they can make a decision without a roll and see how that affects the gameplay, and if they try to do something that is like, well, you have to roll to do that.
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing.
that's definitely a whole skill unto itself that I've had to learn, or have had to put myself in the process of learning. I just re-listening to the most recent released episode, or the one before it, where like that exact moment it happens, in the sense that Holden asks, like, can Teal roll to figure out whether or not we believe this character and what they're saying and doing? And I think that was the first moment where I went, no, you guys just have to make that choice as players, like whether or not you want to go
Sure.
at it or
Yeah.
not.
Well, I think that, I mean, it's all part of the it's all part of season 1 of any Star Trek show.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Figuring us out.
We're just, we're just blocks of characters right now, and as the story goes on, we'll slowly be carved into more finer detail.
Yeah.
Because if you look at original series, season 1 of Picard, of Captain Picard, he is just a dreadful person,
Yeah.
a character, and then he's
not beloved in any way. Just
so
like,
my whole
this
point
guy.
is, we'll learn as players and we'll learn as characters, and hopefully we'll get better, which is a nice segue into a question for you, Emily, which is, do you, since we're getting kind of close on time here, do you see any ways, constructive criticism, where we could improve as storytellers, as a show in general, as players, anything at all?
I hate giving constructive criticism, but that's only because I'm like, but I love it so much. It's so good. I just you guys have gotten better at it, especially once the homebrew started explaining certain elements on how inside the Star Trek lore. And again, that's gotten better as like the homebrew stuff has started, because you kind of have the room to do that with the homebrew stuff. Whereas like the stuff straight out of the book, I'm sure it's like it is this way or the highway. You can't do anything different from that. So because I love y'all's dynamic. Oh, the Oklahoma in me just came out. Your dynamic is just so good. The 5 of you together.
The team dynamics. Thank you.
Yeah,
I've been working hard on
team
that.
dynamics.
6 of you together. I forgot about the team dynamics thing. Yikes. But I mean, like,
yikes, she says.
But I just overall, you guys play off of each other really well, and the comedic timing is really good, and I think that just equates to y'all's. I did it again. Tier.
It's okay. Be you.
Yeah.
I don't know why today, but I have said it a lot today, and I don't normally. So that's why I'm like, why am I like this? But you just guys, you flow well into each, like your comedic timing is really, really good. And not just comedic timing, but like I think it goes back to your stage days, because most of you were on stage together at some point or another, or have done something like that. At least to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure.
No, you're right.
And so I think Tara alluded to it with the improv and everything, and just it's a good exercise in improv and being like, okay, so yes, and
our ship falls apart.
Yep. But just like explaining. So the one with the episode with the spy, he did something to make something else fail or whatever, and they fixed it, and then it didn't, and then whatever. But there was, I can't remember what exactly made me confused, but it was the difference between different elements of what made the ship work. So there was something about power, and then something, I don't know. I got confused. I was like, well, now I don't know what's broken.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay.
That was Sabotage in Station 7, where there were 3 failures that occurred. There was the communications array, the power system, and then the hull breach. All went down at different times, and I think is that what you're referring to? There was just too many cooks in the kitchen narratively in that point.
A little, but it was
good,
more
because that means
like,
that's directed at you, Brian. So you got to get back.
No. No, I just thought it was like my brain.
No, I think I know where you're getting at, though.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that like that aspect in particular is a very dual kind of feeling for me, because it's essentially what you're talking about is the classic Star Trek analogy of like the technobabble and then converted into some overly simplistic metaphor, right? Like the Futurama joke is like a balloon and something bad happening is what Fry absorbs, in that moment, which I love. And like oddly, nerdily, one of the things that most excites me about doing this is the chance to practice those things. It's just like get to do those sorts of things every week or whatever.
Yeah.
But also like, they're difficult to do. And especially in an improv off the cuff setting of, okay, here's this complicated technobabble that I've spent half an hour making sure is kind of internally consistent, but then how do I explain it in such a way that doesn't break the flow of whatever the story is, but also make, and all that. There's actually in the first mission, the confusion about shutting down the power reactor to keep the weapon from exploding, yada yada yada, and like Travis was confused in the moment of like, well, why do I have to do this in order to do that? And I kind of at the moment just said like, because I say so.
You just gotta do it.
You gotta do it.
I'm the DM, and what I say goes.
And then only after the fact did I realize, like, did I think of the perfect analogy for it that would have been perfect in the moment that I just didn't think of, in terms of like, and I'm gonna do it now because now I have the opportunity of like, like the distinction was essentially, well, you stopped it from being Hiroshima, but you still have to stop it from being Chernobyl, right? Like, you know, being able to do
Interesting.
that sort of thing.
Also dark.
Ouch.
Well,
Yeah.
Yikes.
you
Dangerous.
know, is something that I find exciting, but also really intimidating thing to do.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's my only, because I love listening to it. I'll sit there, something will happen, and I'll have my headphones in, and I'll just start cackling in true Sheely form. And Jordan walks around the corner and is like, "What are you listening to?" And I'm like, "It's Starship Tempest." He goes, "Oh, okay," and then walks away. And I just find it's really amusing, and I learn a lot about. Like I said before, I use this term a lot, and I don't. I'm a lore whore. I like to learn things about. I like to know things like story wise and how things flow.
Right.
And so I with the going again, Star Trek fans don't shoot me, with the Star Wars and everything that's going on, and with the Mandalorian and everything right now, and how all of that is tying in, and I'm like, my brain is exploding, everything is interconnected, and I'm so happy.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm such a weirdo for things like that. I love it when there's like the weird like longevity connection that you don't expect to happen, and then you're like, oh wait, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The threads that all tie together throughout the whole tapestry. Yeah.
Right.
So I love that aspect of everything too, because I learn a lot, even if it's like not directly connected to the main Star Trek storyline. I tried to combine all of those words into one.
Swapperter.
I just love learning some of the background stuff, and a lot of it is based on y'all's knowledge. I did it again.
Yeah.
And I'm just rolling with it now.
That's all right. And go for it.
And you, I can't think of the right word, but bequeathing it to everybody else.
Sure.
At the same time. So
yeah.
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Good, because that's the part that really is just everything else is an excuse for me to do that, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad. Also, maybe it would behoove us to drop in some more, like, here's other stuff that's going on in the universe at the time. Although,
don't open that door for Brian.
I was also gonna say, like, during gameplay itself, like, we are herding cats. Like, it's enough to get us to focus on a task at hand. And so
I feel like it's anybody playing a tabletop game ever.
Right. And so, like, the fact that you can follow, you know, every episode and the objectives and everything is
reassuring.
It's really a compliment to Brian for herding the cats that we are, and being like, guys, okay, guys.
Also,
guys.
I honestly think that
don't
adds
encourage me,
to
because
it.
if you want an hour-long episode about mid-century Cardassian politics,
I will do it.
Do not. I am not bluffing.
God, not even I want that.
I know. Maybe it should be a supplemental, like
honestly,
listen at your own risk type episode.
Yeah, one of my coworkers asked something of me with the Mandalorian and everything, and I was like, "Get ready!
Don't you open this box."
Because I have all of the connections, and here's why. And he was like, "This is why I don't ask you questions." And I'm like,
yeah, that's pretty much anytime somebody asks me about if I think Rise of Skywalker is any good. I'm like, oh man.
Oh, I did that, miss. I asked that question.
Yes. Yeah, you did. I remember that. And specifically when people try to make the counter argument that Last Jedi is a horrible movie and Rise of Skywalker isn't, and then it's just game on at that point.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and you will be proud of me because I have taken on your stance on that, and I will fight to my death.
I mean, that's only because I'm right. So.
Well, I mean, like, it's not, we've divulged into Star Wars, but
Yeah,
you are
we should.
right. Like, it's 100%.
Brian's just glaring at us.
I'm staying out of it. I'm staying out of it. I mean, I mostly agree with you guys.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah.
Smart. Good.
Yeah, you don't think Rise of
Wise.
Skywalker's a good movie?
No. And we've had this conversation.
Yeah.
Brian doesn't think most movies are good movies.
Yeah,
because
I'm
reasons.
a pretty tough,
Yeah.
pretty tough critic.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Anyway.
So,
I brought that. I mean, like, the whole thing is, and you guys do a good job. So like,
Thank
with
you.
the story and everything else, and I love learning new stuff. And from my standpoint, I don't know about people who are, and maybe you should interview someone who is a listener who is a big Star Trek person too, to see how they feel from their standpoint, because like from my standpoint, I'm like, I'm learning a lot, I love it. But they could also have something to say to that regard as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Emily is a Patreon donor, so if for any other Patreon listeners that are out there, this is an opportunity for you guys to take note that if you want to contact us via social media, all of our we can be found under the hashtag Starship Tempest, or you can email us, right, Brian, at
starshiptempest@gmail.com.
And if you are interested and would like to join us on a supplemental episode in the future to share your thoughts or just converse with us, we'd love to have you. It's been great fun, Emily. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, anytime.
And congratulations, by the way. I don't think I've talked to you since you got engaged. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Because there was no
Enjoy
Dragon
it.
Con this year.
No,
Right,
I know.
right.
Womp womp.
Because there's been no
Well,
life this year at all.
Yeah. What is life?
But yeah, if you're a listener out there and there was something that you have been confused about or had a question about that we didn't cover necessarily today, by all means, hit us up on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or shoot us an email at starshiptempest@gmail.com. And at the very least, we'll reply back to you. And then maybe even that could become
Do a
the
whole
basis of a
episode.
future episode or something. So
Yeah.
if anybody would like to listen to me or read me talk more about Klingon politics, please try me.
Try. He's not bluffing, folks. He's not
This is
bluffing.
an
Brian
invitation. Please.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Emily, for taking time out of your Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us for another supplemental episode. We'll be back next week with another supplemental episode that we will figure out probably a couple days beforehand.
Isn't this one about Discovery? No?
That's
Yes.
No, because we're gonna
No.
wait until the season is done and then
Oh.
do the Discovery episode. But yeah, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. That'll be next week. And until then, you can always find us on social media at Starship Tempest on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, although I keep meaning to do more Twitch and I haven't done it yet. Email us at starshiptempest@gmail. And you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Starship Tempest. So thank you very much, guys. And until next time, we'll see you out there.
We'll see you out there.
See you out there. Woo.